This story is titled, At Our Wedding, My Future Wife Called Me Her Walking Wallet and said I follow her around like a lapdog while still believing she'll actually marry me. So I made her regret those words and left everyone speechless. Sup Reddit, I'm a 33-year-old construction contractor living in Tampa, and I built my business from absolutely nothing after dropping out of college. When I started, it was just me and a pickup truck, taking whatever small jobs I could find. Now, several years later, I have 12 skilled guys working for me, and we handle mid-sized commercial renovations across 4 counties. It's not the most glamorous work in the world, but it brings in solid money, and I'm my own boss, which means everything to me. I was engaged to Vanessa, who's 29 and works as a marketing director at some fancy agency downtown. We'd been together for nearly 5 years at that point, having met through my cousin's barbecue party way back when. I remember how she seemed genuinely fascinated that I worked with my hands for a living. She called it refreshing compared to all the soft office guys she usually dated. Looking back now, I should have realized that I was just a novelty to her, something different and interesting rather than someone she truly respected. Vanessa was absolutely trophy girlfriend material, the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into any room. She always wore designer clothes, had perfect hair, and maintained that polished look that comes from spending serious money on your appearance. At the time, I was so caught up in feeling lucky to be with someone like her that I completely missed what was actually happening. I wasn't being evaluated as a partner or someone she genuinely loved. I was being assessed as an investment opportunity. About 18 months into our relationship, she started suggesting changes to various aspects of my life. It began with small things that seemed reasonable enough. My clothes weren't quite right for dinners with her work friends, she'd mention. My contractor pickup truck was apparently too blue-collar for certain neighborhoods we'd visit together. These suggestions felt like helpful advice from someone who cared about me, so I started making adjustments without really thinking about what it meant. We moved in together after 2.5 years of dating. The house we lived in was mine. I'd bought it as a foreclosure several years earlier and had renovated the entire place myself before Vanessa and I even met. It was one of my proudest accomplishments, transforming a run-down property into something beautiful and functional through my own skills and hard work. But when she moved in, suddenly, everything needed major upgrading according to her standards. The kitchen wasn't entertainer-friendly enough for the dinner parties she wanted to host. The master bathroom desperately needed granite countertops to bring it up to her expectations. Like an idiot, I gave in way more than I should have, dropping nearly $70,000 on renovations to make the space ours. What kills me now when I think about it is remembering those dinner parties she'd throw for her work colleagues. She would give elaborate tours of all the renovations to her friends, acting like she had designed and planned everything herself. We decided on Carrara marble for the countertops, she'd say with authority, when the reality was that she had demanded it, and I had paid for every penny. She presented our home improvements as collaborative decisions when they were really just her expensive wishes that I'd funded without question. My buddy Connor, who's been with me since day one of starting the business, tried to warn me about what was happening. After meeting Vanessa for only the second time, he pulled me aside and said bluntly, "She's trying to upgrade you like one of her renovation projects." At the time, I completely wrote him off as being paranoid, and maybe even a little jealous of my relationship. I thought he just didn't understand Vanessa or appreciate how good she was for me. But Connor had noticed things that I was completely blind to, probably because I was so infatuated with her. He pointed out how Vanessa would physically position herself between me and anyone important at social gatherings, like she was some kind of handler ready to jump in if I said something that wasn't polished enough for her crowd. She'd hover nearby during conversations, and I could feel her tension whenever I was talking to her work colleagues or anyone she considered sophisticated. At the time, I thought she was just being supportive, but Connor saw it for what it really was: damage control. I proposed to her last August after taking her on what I thought would be the perfect romantic getaway to Costa Rica. I dropped $8,000 on that trip alone, wanting everything to be absolutely perfect for the moment. Then, there was another $14,000 for the engagement ring, which she had been casually showing me examples of for months leading up to the proposal. She never directly asked for anything specific, but she had a way of leaving jewelry store websites open on her laptop or mentioning how beautiful certain rings were when we'd pass by jewelry stores. I thought I was being thoughtful by paying attention to her hints. Fast forward to last month, and we'd been planning our engagement party for weeks. This wasn't going to be some casual get-together. Vanessa insisted on renting out the entire upstairs section at Romano's, this fancy Italian place downtown that she absolutely loved. We hired a live band that would play all of her favorite songs, and I had arranged for an elaborate 5-course meal that would impress all of her work friends and family. The entire event cost me close to $12,000 when everything was said and done, but I wanted her to have the perfect night. I thought she deserved it, and I was proud to be able to provide that kind of experience for the woman I loved. What struck me even then was how Vanessa insisted on approving every single detail of the party, from the menu to the decorations to the music selection. But she contributed exactly $0 to the event. When I suggested that maybe we should split the cost since it was our engagement party, she actually laughed out loud. "But you're the one with the successful business," she said, as if that settled the matter completely. What made this particularly frustrating was that her salary as a marketing director at a prestigious firm was actually higher than what I was taking home after reinvesting profits back into my company. But somehow, in her mind, my money was our money, while her money remained entirely her own. The night of the party finally arrived, and everything was going perfectly. The venue looked amazing, the food was excellent, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. I was standing by the bar talking with my brother Lucas and Connor, just enjoying the moment and feeling genuinely happy about our future together. We were discussing some upcoming projects when Connor suddenly nudged me and said quietly, "Your girl's getting pretty animated over there." I looked over in the direction he was pointing and saw Vanessa huddled in a corner with 3 of her work friends. They were positioned halfway behind one of those ridiculous ice sculptures that she had absolutely insisted we needed for the party. But from my angle at the bar, I could still see them clearly. They hadn't noticed that I was watching them, and they seemed to be having an intense, private conversation in the middle of our celebration. What I heard next completely shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship. Vanessa was saying, "I mean, he's stable and dependable, I'll give him that. And the business actually makes decent money, enough for that vacation property in Vail we're looking at next year." She paused for a moment, and I could see her gesturing with her wine glass. "But honestly, the whole contractor thing was cute at first, but God, he's so out of place at company events. It's becoming embarrassing." Her friend Jennifer laughed in response and said, "At least he's good looking though. My husband's going bald and getting a gut." I felt my stomach drop as I realized they were talking about me like I was some kind of commodity or investment rather than a person they respected. "Yeah, there's that," Vanessa sighed, sounding almost resigned. "But seriously, just the other day, one of the VPs at work asked what Marcus did for a living, and I just said he's in construction management. I couldn't bring myself to say he's basically just a glorified handyman." The casual cruelty in her voice was something I'd never heard before, and it hit me like a physical blow. She continued, "You should have seen him trying to talk to my boss at the holiday party last year. It was like watching a child try to sit at the adults' table. He just doesn't understand how to navigate these professional social situations." All 3 of her friends started cackling at this, and I felt my face burning with humiliation and rage. Her friend Nicole chimed in with a smirk. "But at least you got the ring you wanted. That thing must have cost him a fortune." She was right. It had cost me exactly 4 months of my take-home income, just as Vanessa had expected. 4 months of his income as it should be, Vanessa replied with obvious satisfaction. "Though it's funny, he actually thinks I'm with him for his ambition and drive. Meanwhile, I've got Bradley from the legal department texting me every weekend, wondering when I'm going to come to my senses and leave Marcus for someone more appropriate." "You're terrible!" Nicole giggled, but she was clearly enjoying the gossip. "I'm practical," Vanessa replied matter-of-factly. "Marcus is easy to manage because he thinks he scored way above his league, so he'll do literally anything to keep me happy. It's actually kind of pathetic. Watch this." She turned around, pretending to scan the room for me. "I swear, he follows me around like a desperate dog, always looking for approval. It's almost sad how eager he is to please." That's when our eyes met across the room. The color drained from her face so fast that I thought she was going to pass out right there. Her friends followed her gaze and saw me standing there, just staring at them with Connor and Lucas flanking me like bodyguards. The entire group froze, realizing that I had heard every single word of their conversation. I didn't say anything at all. I just looked directly at her for what felt like 7 of the longest seconds of my life, letting her see in my expression that I had heard everything. Then I turned around and walked straight toward the exit, not looking back. "Marcus, wait!" Vanessa caught up to me at the coat check, her voice panicked and breathless. Baby, they were just joking around. You know how girls get when we're drinking. We say stupid things we don't mean. I looked at her with absolutely zero expression on my face, keeping my voice completely flat and emotionless. Go back to your friends, I told her. Sounds like you were having fun explaining what a joke I am. Then I walked out into the cold March night, leaving her standing there in the doorway of the restaurant. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name repeatedly, her voice getting more desperate with each shout. But I just kept walking to my truck without turning around. As I pulled away from the parking lot, I could see her in my rearview mirror, standing there in her $1,500 dress with her mascara starting to run down her face. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone had completely blown up with texts and voicemails from Vanessa. I didn't read a single text or listen to any of the voicemails. Instead, I went straight inside, pulled out my laptop, and started planning my next moves with the same methodical approach I use for construction projects. First, I checked all of our financial connections to understand exactly what I was dealing with. There was a joint credit card, but thankfully she was just an authorized user on my account rather than a co-signer. We had a vacation house down payment fund in a separate account with both our names on it. There was our shared phone plan that I paid for entirely. Most concerning was her car loan that I had co-signed for because her credit was temporarily messed up, which I later learned actually meant she had $42,000 in credit card debt when we first met that she had never mentioned. What most guys miss in these situations is understanding the legal angle of what they're dealing with. I'd seen enough messy breakups among my crew over the years to know that engaged couples have different legal standing depending on which state you're in. In our state, engagement rings are considered conditional gifts, which means if the wedding doesn't happen, the ring legally goes back to the person who purchased it. The law was definitely on my side there, but I needed to be extremely careful about the co-signed car loan and any joint accounts. I spent the next 4 hours methodically untangling our financial lives with the precision of a surgeon. I called the bank's 24-hour customer service line to remove her as an authorized user on my main credit card. I changed all of my passwords for every account she might have access to. I moved my half of the vacation fund to a completely new account at a different bank. I drafted a detailed email to my lawyer, Robert, about the legal implications of breaking an engagement in our state and what steps I needed to take to protect myself. It was around 1:30 in the morning when I heard her key turning in the front door lock. I was sitting calmly at the kitchen island with my laptop open, feeling more composed and clear-headed than I had in years. She burst through the door with makeup streaks down her face, looking completely frantic. "How could you just leave like that?" she demanded, her voice shaking with emotion. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me? Everyone was asking questions about where you went. I had to make up some story about your crew having an emergency at a job site." I just looked at her silently for a long moment, then said in the most even tone I could manage, "We're done. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live and get your stuff out of my house." "What? Over some stupid girl talk? Are you kidding me?" Her voice went up an octave, and I could see the panic setting in as she realized I was completely serious. "It's over, Vanessa. I'm not discussing it," I replied firmly, keeping my tone steady and final. Her entire demeanor changed instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. She went from rage and indignation to tearful pleading in a matter of seconds. "Baby, please. You know I didn't mean any of that. I was just trying to sound cool for the girls. You know how competitive Jennifer is about everything? She's always trying to make everyone else feel bad about their relationships." I closed my laptop and stood up from the kitchen island. 30 days, I repeated. "I'll sleep in the guest room during that time, and I'll continue paying the utilities as usual. But everything else, your car payment, your credit cards, that $450 monthly wellness membership you insisted you needed, that's all on you now." "Where are you going?" she demanded as I started walking toward the stairs. "To grab some clothes," I said without turning around. "I'm going out." I drove straight to Connor's place, and when I showed up at his door at 2:30 in the morning, he just handed me a drink without asking any questions and fired up the PlayStation. We played Call of Duty until sunrise, just like we used to do in the old days before Vanessa started making comments about how men who play video games past the age of 30 are avoiding adulthood and need to mature beyond teenage hobbies. Connor didn't ask for details about what had happened, which was exactly what I needed at that moment. He just provided the quiet understanding that comes from someone who gets that sometimes a man needs space to process what he's been through before he's ready to talk about it. By the time the sun came up, I had decided on my next moves and felt ready to face whatever was coming. The next morning, calls started coming in from her parents. Her dad, Richard, is this corporate lawyer type who's always treated me with barely concealed condescension since the day we met. He's the kind of guy who asks what kind of little business I run every single time we see each other, as if he can't quite remember or believe that I employ over a dozen people and handle million-dollar renovation projects. I picked up the phone out of pure morbid curiosity to see what he would say. "Marcus, it's Richard. Catherine's here too," he said in that pompous tone he always used. "We understand there was some unpleasantness last night between you and Vanessa." I let him talk for a solid 8 minutes straight about youthful indiscretions, and how Vanessa has always had a flair for the dramatic, and how I was taking a private comment completely out of context. What he was really saying, beneath all the corporate lawyer language, was that their daughter needed my financial support, so I should get back in line and stop making waves. It became clear to me that Richard had been banking on me as the long-term solution to Vanessa's spending habits since our second year together. I'd actually overheard him once telling her that she'd finally found someone with a practical mind about money, meaning someone who would pay her bills without complaining about it. When he finally shut up, I just said calmly, "Richard, I heard your daughter loud and clear last night. She has 30 days to move out, and I hope we can keep this civil." Then her mom, Catherine, got on the phone with the waterworks, talking about how Vanessa was just so devastated and had cried all night. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this," I told Catherine. "But this isn't a misunderstanding. I heard exactly what she thinks of me." After I hung up, I immediately blocked both of their phone numbers. Then I drove to our main job site and buried myself in physical work. My foreman Carlos took one look at my face when I arrived at the job site and knew something was seriously off. Without asking any questions, he just said, "Engagement's done," and I confirmed it with a simple nod. "Her loss, Jefe," he replied, handing me a hammer. Carlos had been with me almost as long as Connor, starting as a basic laborer and working his way up through pure skill and dedication. Now he was running entire job sites for me. The guy could frame a wall perfectly in the dark during a hurricane if he had to. More importantly, he understood when to talk and when to just shut up and let a man work through his problems. By lunchtime, the physical labor had cleared my head completely, and I developed a new strategy for handling this situation. In construction, you learn very quickly that verbal agreements aren't worth the paper they're written on. Everything that matters gets documented, photographed, and signed off on by all parties involved. I decided to apply the same principles to this breakup. I called Robert, my lawyer, from the job trailer and arranged to meet with him that afternoon. I brought printouts of all our financial entanglements, text messages where Vanessa had discussed our joint purchases and future plans, and a complete timeline of our relationship milestones with dates and major decisions. Robert was genuinely impressed with my level of preparation. "You're thinking clearly," he told me. "That's actually pretty rare in these kinds of emotional situations." By the end of our meeting, I had a crystal-clear legal strategy mapped out. Since we weren't legally married, the house was unquestionably mine with no complications. The joint savings account would be split based on contribution records, which I had meticulously maintained. The engagement ring was legally mine to reclaim, since she had effectively broken the engagement through her actions and statements. The only potentially complicated part was the car loan, which would require her cooperation to resolve cleanly. When I got home that night, braced for what I expected to be World War III, the house was completely empty. That was absolutely fine by me. I grabbed fresh sheets for the guest room, took a long hot shower, and crashed early for the first time in months. Vanessa came home around midnight, clearly wasted from whatever she'd been doing. I could hear her sobbing dramatically in the master bedroom, but I just put in my earbuds and went to sleep. The next few weeks established a pattern that my buddy Lucas dubbed the shadow game. I would leave for work before she woke up, come home late, and completely ignore her existence in the house. To me, she had become nothing but a ghost, temporarily haunting my home, and I treated her accordingly. Lucas had gone through something very similar with his ex-wife about 4 years earlier, so he understood exactly what I was dealing with. "The less you engage with her, the more it drives them crazy," he advised me. "They're used to having emotional power over you. When that disappears completely, they don't know what to do with themselves." He was absolutely right. Vanessa tried everything imaginable to get some kind of reaction out of me. She would have crying jags that conveniently started whenever I entered a room. She'd attempt to start screaming matches where she was the only one screaming. She started walking around the house in lingerie that 7 months ago would have had me following her around like a teenager. When none of that worked, she tried a different approach. She started cooking elaborate dinners and talking about our future plans as if absolutely nothing had happened between us. I would just heat up my takeout and eat in either the guest room or my home office, completely ignoring whatever performance she was putting on in the kitchen. One night, she left a folder full of vacation home listings on my desk with a note that said, "I'm still excited for our future together." I returned it to her the next morning with a single post-it note attached. "Please don't leave your things in my office." The house had essentially become a psychological battleground, and I was winning by refusing to fight. In construction, you learn that sometimes the smartest move is to just let gravity do the work for you rather than trying to force something that's already unstable. I applied the same principle to this situation. I didn't need to actively push her away or engage in arguments. I just had to remove my support and let her fall on her own. About 2.5 weeks into this Cold War, her entire social circle started launching an assault on me. I was getting texts telling me I was being childish and cruel. Her sister Diana called to say she was worried about Vanessa's mental health and that I was being unreasonable. The only real surprise came when her coworker Nicole, one of the women who had been part of that conversation at the engagement party, actually texted me to apologize. Nicole said she'd always thought Vanessa treated me like an accessory rather than a partner, and she felt bad about not speaking up sooner. I was surprised enough by this that I actually called her back to hear what she had to say. "The way she talks about you when you're not around, it's like you're a project she's working on, not a person she loves," Nicole admitted over the phone. "I should have said something sooner, but I didn't want to create workplace drama. I've been uncomfortable with her attitude toward you for years." That conversation confirmed what I already knew deep down. I hadn't been a status symbol or a trophy boyfriend. I'd been more like a renovation project that she was constantly trying to improve and upgrade. Then I did something that really got under Vanessa's skin. I started having people over to my own house again. My crew would come by after work for beers on the deck that I'd built with my own hands. My brother Lucas started coming over for dinner regularly. My business partner Derek and I would spread out construction plans for our new office building on the dining room table that Vanessa had declared too nice for blueprints. And then there was Grace, my new project manager. She's 31, divorced with no kids, and absolutely brilliant when it comes to client management and project coordination. Grace had started coming by the house to review complex projects since my home office has much better space and lighting than our cramped job trailer. Vanessa had never liked Grace from the one time they'd met at our company holiday party. She claimed that Grace was inappropriately familiar with me and acted like she had some kind of claim on my attention. The reality was that Vanessa hated the fact that Grace understood my business better than she had ever bothered to learn in 5 years of being together. Grace didn't just understand my business, she genuinely respected it. Where Vanessa saw just construction work, Grace saw the complexity and skill involved in what we did. She asked intelligent questions about load calculations and material properties. She could read a blueprint as easily as most people read a magazine, and she appreciated the problem-solving aspects of our work. 4 weeks after the engagement party disaster, Grace and I were reviewing some particularly complicated blueprints at the dining room table. We were laughing about a ridiculous client request. They wanted us to somehow incorporate a home theater into a space that was structurally impossible to modify. When Vanessa walked in from what had clearly been a girls' night involving plenty of alcohol, she took one look at us with our heads bent close together over the plans, sharing an inside joke about our work, and you could practically see the steam coming out of her ears. Without saying a single word, she stormed upstairs. 3 minutes later, she came stomping back down and headed straight out the front door, slamming it so hard that one of her precious decorative plates fell off the wall and shattered on the floor. She came back after 1 a.m., and as soon as she saw me, she slurred, "Are you sleeping with her in our bed?" I looked up from my laptop where I was reviewing project timelines. "First, it's my bed in my house," I replied calmly. "Second, no, I'm not sleeping with Grace. And third, even if I was, it wouldn't be any of your business anymore. 7 years together, and you're already moving on to that job-stealing witch," she said, her words getting more slurred and aggressive. I closed my laptop and stood up. "Focus on finding a new place, Vanessa. You've got 9 days left." I see how she looks at you with those desperate divorcee eyes. Probably spreading her legs under the table while you're pretending to look at blueprints, she continued with increasing venom. "Get some sleep," I told her firmly. "You're embarrassing yourself." That comment set her off on a screaming tirade that included every insecurity she thought I had, from my lack of a college education to my supposed social awkwardness around her work friends. She was trying to hit me where she thought it would hurt most, dredging up every vulnerability she imagined I possessed. I just walked upstairs, locked myself in the guest room, and put on my noise-canceling headphones. What she didn't understand was that after 7 years of her subtle put-downs and constant suggestions for improvement, none of these insults were landing anymore. I'd built a successful business without a college degree. My clients respected me, my crew respected me, and I'd proven my worth through actual results rather than credentials. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass coming from downstairs. I rushed down to find Vanessa systematically smashing framed photos of us against the kitchen counter. Glass and broken frames were scattered everywhere. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, which was probably the most emotion I'd shown in weeks. "Getting your attention!" she screamed. Mascara streaked down her face despite it being only 8 a.m. "You can't just ice me out for weeks like this. We need to talk about this like adults." I looked at the mess of glass and broken frames scattered across my kitchen floor. "I'll talk to you when you clean this up and calm down," I told her. "No, you'll talk to me now!" she shouted, picking up another frame and hurling it at the wall. That's when I decided to play my ace card. I pulled out my phone, opened a banking app, and turned the screen toward her. On it was the balance of our vacation home down payment fund. Except now it showed exactly half of what had been there before. "What did you do?" she whispered, the color draining completely from her face. "I took my half," I said calmly. "The half that I contributed to the account." But we need all of it for the down payment," she stammered. "We can't qualify for the loan without the full amount." "Not my problem anymore," I replied with a shrug. Her entire body seemed to deflate as the reality of the situation finally hit her. The Vail vacation home she'd been bragging about to her friends for months was gone. The status symbol she'd been counting on to impress her social circle had just evaporated before her eyes. What she didn't know was that I'd already spoken directly to the real estate agent and explained the situation. He had been sympathetic and returned my earnest money deposit without any penalty. Vanessa had been CC'd on that email, but she clearly hadn't bothered to read it. Too busy trying to manipulate me back into her control to pay attention to the practical details. "You can't do this," she said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Already did," I replied matter-of-factly. "And if you break one more thing in my house, I'll call the police and have you removed today instead of letting you stay the full 30 days. She crumpled to the floor, sobbing for real this time. No theatrics, no performance, just the ugly cry of someone watching all their carefully laid plans disintegrate. I stepped around her and left for work. That day, I did something I should have done years earlier. I had a completely frank conversation with my business partner Derek about our growth strategy. For years, Vanessa had been pushing me to take on bigger commercial projects to increase our prestige, even though our profit margins were actually better on the mid-sized jobs we specialized in. Derek had been suggesting we focus on our strengths and what we did best, but I'd been ignoring his solid business advice in order to please Vanessa's need for status. "Let's refocus on what we do best," I told Derek over lunch. "No more chasing prestige projects just for the sake of looking impressive. Let's build our reputation on quality and reliability instead of trying to be something we're not." Derek smiled broadly. "Welcome back, man," he said. "I've really missed the old you." That night when I came home, she was sitting calmly at the kitchen table. The broken glass and frames had been completely cleaned up, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Can we please talk?" she asked quietly, her voice hoarse from crying. I nodded and sat across from her at the table. "I'm sorry," she said, looking directly at me. "What I said at the party was awful. I was just showing off for my friends. You know how they are, always competing over who has the best life." "Here's what I know," I replied evenly. "I heard exactly what you think of me when you don't think I'm listening, and I believe people when they tell me who they really are." "It's not who I am," she protested. "I was drunk and stupid." "No, you were honest for once," I said firmly. She started crying again, quieter this time. "What can I do to fix this? Please, Marcus, I'll do anything." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Nothing. There's nothing you can do. We're done." "But I love you," she said desperately. "No, you love what I provide," I corrected her. "There's a difference." I got up and started walking away, but as I reached the stairs, I turned back. "By the way, I called the dealership today. I'm having my name removed from your car loan. You've got until the end of the month to refinance it on your own, or they'll repossess it." Her head snapped up, panic filling her eyes. "What? You can't do that!" "My credit still isn't good enough to qualify on my own," she said desperately. "Again, not my problem." "But I need my car for work. How am I supposed to get around?" "Not my problem anymore," I repeated. "Figure it out." Her face crumpled completely. "Please stop this. I'm begging you." 30 days to move out, I said firmly. 8 days to refinance the car. Those are the only things I'm willing to discuss with you. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already consulted with Robert about the car situation. As a co-signer, I had the legal right to request removal if the primary borrower was able to refinance on their own. If she couldn't qualify for refinancing, the lender could demand immediate payment in full or proceed with repossession. I wasn't going to remain on the hook for a $48,000 luxury car that she had insisted on leasing despite my objections about the monthly payments. 6 days later, I came home to find a moving truck in my driveway and Vanessa's parents helping her load boxes. When I walked in, she looked up from packing and said simply, "I'm leaving today. My parents are helping me move into a new apartment." "Okay," I said, hanging up my keys. "Need help with anything heavy?" "Really? That's all you have to say to me?" she asked, her voice rising in disbelief. I shrugged. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe that you'll miss me? That you're sorry it ended this way? Something that shows you actually cared about me at all?" "I'm not sorry it ended," I replied honestly. "I'm just sorry I didn't see you clearly sooner." Richard walked in carrying a box labeled kitchen, gave me a stiff nod, and then said to Vanessa, "That's the last of the kitchen stuff. Your mother's doing a final check of the bathroom." Once he was back outside, Vanessa looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I did love you, you know. In my way. Your way wasn't good enough," I told her. She reached into her purse and pulled out a check, holding it out to me. "Here, my half of the vacation fund. I'm giving it back to you." I took the check and looked at it. "Why?" "Because I need a favor. A big one." She took a deep breath. "The bank won't let me refinance the car. I called everywhere. No one will approve me with my current debt-to-income ratio. Please don't take your name off the loan, just until I can improve my credit situation." I folded the check and handed it back to her. "Keep it. You're going to need it for a down payment on a much cheaper car." "Marcus, please, I can't lose my car. I'll lose my job if I can't get to work reliably." "Nope, not a chance. I made one mistake, one stupid mistake." "No, you showed me who you really are," I corrected her. "And I believe you." Her mother walked in then, effectively ending the conversation. An hour later, they were gone. Vanessa left her key on the kitchen counter without saying another word. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept in my own bed. The next morning, I called my attorney again. "She's out, what's next?" "Robert advised me to change the locks immediately and document the condition of the house in case Vanessa tried to claim she'd left personal property behind that she needed to retrieve. I spent the weekend photographing every room, changing every password she might have known, and switching all my accounts to paperless billing to prevent any mail from accidentally going to her. It's been 7 months since that engagement party, and my life has completely transformed. The business is absolutely booming. We landed 3 major commercial contracts that will keep us busy for the next 18 months. I bought out my business partner Derek and brought on Connor and Carlos as junior partners instead. Connor had been with me from the very beginning, turning down better-paying jobs at other companies to help me get my business off the ground. Carlos had proven himself countless times as the most reliable foreman I'd ever worked with. My brother Lucas moved in temporarily after his own divorce, and it's been like reliving our 20s, but with more money and fewer hangovers. The house has returned to being a comfortable place where I can put my feet on the coffee table without hearing lectures about respecting fine furniture. As for Grace, we started dating about 5 months ago. It turns out that Vanessa's jealousy wasn't completely unfounded. Grace had always been interested in something more than a professional relationship, but she had respected boundaries too much to ever cross them while I was engaged. She's the complete anti-Vanessa in every way that matters. She's genuinely interested in my work rather than embarrassed by it. She's comfortable in jeans and a t-shirt rather than always needing designer clothes. And she actually thinks it's cool that I build things with my hands, rather than seeing it as something that needs to be explained or apologized for. Last weekend, she helped me frame out a new deck edition, showing up in work boots with her own tool belt. Our relationship has developed naturally without any pressure or manipulation. She doesn't try to change me or apologize for me to her friends, and I don't feel like I need to constantly impress her with expensive gifts or renovations. Vanessa's life went in the complete opposite direction from mine. The car got repossessed exactly 3 weeks after she moved out, just as I had warned her it would. Her company did a round of layoffs, and despite her confidence that she was too valuable to cut, she was actually one of the first people to go. According to mutual friends, She had to move back in with her parents at 29 years old, which is exactly the kind of thing she used to mock other people for doing. I didn't take any satisfaction in her downfall. In construction, you learn that karma has a way of catching up with poor decisions without needing any help from you. Shoddy work always reveals itself eventually, and so does shoddy character. When you cut corners or don't respect the foundation, everything built on top of it eventually comes crashing down. The final cherry on top came when I ran into her sister Diana at the grocery store a few months later. After some awkward small talk, she surprised me by saying, "You dodged a bullet, you know. Vanessa's been dating her boss from the new job, the married one. Mom and Dad are beside themselves about it." I just nodded and said, "I hope she figures herself out someday," then walked away. I couldn't help but smile a little as I left. Not because I wish her ill, I genuinely don't, but because I'm so grateful that I overheard her that night at the engagement party. I came so close to legally tying myself to someone who saw me as nothing but a bank account with a person attached that she was embarrassed to be seen with in public. Just when I thought I was completely done with the Vanessa drama, something else happened about 3 weeks ago that caught me completely off guard. I was finishing up at our biggest job site when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Marcus, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but we have a situation." It was Richard, Vanessa's dad. "What kind of situation?" I asked cautiously. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "It's about the Riverside Commons project." My blood ran cold. Riverside Commons was a massive commercial development project that my company had bid on last month. Winning this contract would essentially double our business overnight and set us up for years of growth. "What about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm on the board that's advising Thompson Development on contractor selection," Richard said. "Vanessa found out about this, and she's been saying things. She's been suggesting that your company isn't financially stable enough for a project this size." "Are you kidding me?" I felt my temper rising for the first time in months. "I'm not condoning what she's doing," Richard said quickly. "In fact, I'm calling to warn you. The final selection meeting is this Thursday, and I've seen the shortlist. You're on it, but you're barely hanging on because of these concerns she's been spreading." I wasn't entirely surprised by this development. Vanessa knew exactly where to hit me to cause maximum damage. She'd picked up enough about my business over our 7 years together to know which buttons to push. Going after my professional reputation was the one thing that could still get to me, and she knew it. I thanked Richard stiffly and hung up, then immediately called my accountant. We spent the entire night preparing a comprehensive financial portfolio that would showcase not just our stability, but our impressive growth trajectory over the last 6 years. I included bank statements, tax returns, client references, proof of bonding capacity, and detailed cash flow projections. My accountant knew exactly what we needed to showcase. "Your debt-to-income ratio is better than 85% of contractors your size," she pointed out. "And your completion rate, on schedule and under budget, puts you in the top tier nationally." The next morning, I emailed the complete portfolio directly to Thompson Development with a professionally worded letter addressing the concerns head-on. I wrote that while I respected the selection committee's process, I wanted to provide additional documentation to counter any misinformation about my company's financial standing. I requested a formal follow-up meeting to discuss the portfolio in person. 3 hours later, Thompson's assistant called to schedule a meeting for the following afternoon. I spent that night reviewing every single detail of the Riverside Commons plans, identifying potential cost-saving measures and efficiency improvements that weren't included in my original bid. When you build things for a living, you learn to look at every problem from multiple angles. Sometimes the obvious approach isn't the best one, and experience teaches you to see solutions that others might miss. I found 4 specific places where alternative materials would save significant money without sacrificing any quality. I also identified a sequencing change in the construction timeline that would shave 3 weeks off the overall project duration. These weren't corners to cut or ways to compromise the integrity of the work. They were smarter solutions that a less experienced contractor might not think of. I showed up 15 minutes early for the meeting in my best suit. Thompson was alone in his office with my financial portfolio open on his desk, sections highlighted and flagged with sticky notes. "I appreciate you sending this over," he said without any preamble. He was direct and businesslike, exactly how I prefer to operate. Very thorough and exactly how I like to do business. "I believe in addressing concerns with facts, not rhetoric," I replied. "My company has 0 debt, 22% year-over-year growth for the past 6 years, and enough liquid capital to handle a project twice this size without breaking a sweat." Thompson nodded, studying me carefully. The board had questions about your financial stability. This answers them definitively. He tapped my portfolio with his finger. But more importantly, we toured your Ocean View project yesterday. Very impressive work. The Ocean View project was a mid-sized office renovation we had just completed a few months earlier. Nothing flashy or attention-grabbing, but it represented rock-solid craftsmanship with some innovative solutions to a tricky electrical challenge. It was exactly the kind of work I was most proud of: practical, durable, and smartly executed. We spent the next hour and 15 minutes discussing specific aspects of the Riverside Commons project in detail. I laid out my complete implementation plan, timeline, and presented the additional cost-saving measures I'd identified. The entire conversation was all business with no drama, which was exactly how I wanted it. "One more thing," Thompson said as we were wrapping up the meeting. "I heard there might be some personal factors at play in the board's concerns about your company." I kept my face completely neutral. "My personal life and my business are completely separate. Always have been." "Good," he nodded with approval. "That's exactly what I told the board. I don't care about gossip or personal drama. I care about who can deliver quality work on time and on budget." 3 days later, I received a call from Thompson himself. We had won the Riverside Commons contract. This was a project that would set my company up for years of growth and establish us as a major player in commercial construction. I immediately called Connor and Carlos into my office to share the news. We would need to hire at least 8 more skilled workers and invest in additional equipment to handle a project of this magnitude. They were absolutely ecstatic. This was exactly the kind of growth opportunity we'd been working toward for years. "Should we celebrate tonight?" Carlos suggested, grinning from ear to ear. "No," I replied. "Let's wait until we break ground on the project. Then we'll celebrate properly." The following day, Richard called again to congratulate me on landing the Riverside Commons contract. I kept the conversation brief and professional, telling him plainly to keep his daughter away from my business going forward. He sighed heavily and mentioned that he and Catherine had come to see things very differently now, finding Vanessa's post-breakup behavior quite illuminating. I didn't have much interest in their sudden insight after enabling her sense of entitlement her entire life. Richard also made sure to mention that he had recused himself from the final vote, assuring me that I had won the contract fairly based on merit. It was too little, too late for me to care about his ethical concerns. 3 days later, Vanessa texted me about hearing that I'd gotten the Riverside contract. I didn't respond to that message. She followed up with more texts about her car being repossessed, losing her apartment, and having to move back in with her parents while working as an assistant for half her previous salary. When she finally asked directly for financial help, I simply replied with one word: no. She pleaded that I must still care about her because I'm a good person. I told her calmly, "You're wrong on both counts. I'm just a glorified handyman, remember?" And I stopped caring when I heard what you really thought of me. Her final plea for help was met with my sending her a link to a receptionist job application at one of my clients' businesses. It paid enough for a cheap apartment and a bus pass. That was the only assistance I was willing to provide. When she realized that was all I would offer, I wished her luck and blocked her number for good. The Riverside Commons project breaks ground next week, and this morning I signed the final paperwork for Connor and Carlos's partnership agreements. The company now has 3 equal partners instead of just me carrying all the risk and responsibility. It feels absolutely right to spread both the risks and the rewards to the 2 men who have been with me through everything and helped build this business from the ground up. Connor had been with me from the very beginning, turning down multiple offers for better-paying jobs at established companies to help me get my business off the ground when I had nothing but a pickup truck and big dreams. Carlos had proven himself countless times over the years, working his way up from a basic laborer to someone I trust to run entire job sites without supervision. Both of them had earned this partnership through loyalty, skill, and dedication, rather than just being handed something they didn't deserve. To any guy reading this who suspects that his partner sees him as a meal ticket or a renovation project instead of a real partner, my advice is simple. Pay close attention to how she talks about you when she thinks you can't hear her. That unguarded conversation will tell you the unfiltered truth about what she really thinks. Everything else is just a performance designed to keep you providing what she wants. I've learned a tremendous amount during these past months since overhearing that conversation at the engagement party. The most important lesson has been to value the people who genuinely value your work, not just your wallet. Those are the relationships worth investing in, whether they're business partnerships, friendships, or romantic relationships. We have a saying in construction that I've come to appreciate on a much deeper level. The strength of the foundation determines how tall you can build. If your foundation is solid, built on mutual respect, honest communication, and shared values, you can build something that will last for decades. But if your foundation is unstable, built on pretense, financial dependency, and one person feeling superior to the other, everything you try to build on top of it will eventually come crashing down. Looking back, I can see now that Vanessa and I never had a solid foundation for a real partnership. What we had was a transaction disguised as a relationship. I provided financial security and status, and she provided the appearance of success and sophistication. But there was no genuine respect, no real partnership, and no foundation strong enough to build a life on. The relationship I have with Grace is completely different. It's built on mutual respect for each other's work and abilities. She doesn't see my job as something to be embarrassed about or explained away. She sees it as skilled work that requires intelligence, problem-solving, and expertise. When we're together, I don't feel like I'm being evaluated or improved upon. I feel like I'm with someone who appreciates who I am rather than someone who's constantly trying to turn me into someone else. That's the difference between a real partnership and a renovation project. In a real partnership, both people bring value to the relationship and respect what the other person contributes. In a renovation project, one person sees the other as raw material that needs to be improved and upgraded to meet their standards. I'm grateful every day that I overheard that conversation at the engagement party. It was painful and humiliating in the moment, but it saved me from legally binding myself to someone who would have spent the rest of our marriage trying to change me into someone I'm not. Sometimes, the most painful truths turn out to be the most valuable gifts you can receive. The business is thriving, my personal relationships are based on genuine respect and affection, and I'm sleeping well in my own bed in my own house. Life is good, and it's only getting better from here.